welcome to day 2 of the Celebrate and Recalibrate Flamenco events. As people come into the room, I would like to invite you to have your cameras open. This is a family-friendly, pet-friendly, colleague-friendly space for everyone. We are here to look at flamenco, to look at different chapters from this book, but also to be together, to share space together. Even though we are in the virtual space, it is still our goal to help create a flamenco space. So at a different point in the evening tonight, we will, or day for some, we will listen to flamenco again, because it's important to remember that flamenco is a living, breathing art form that also lives and comes from our bodies. So throughout the day, I will ask us to just kind of also check in with ourselves and honor that. As I've said, we are here looking at the book Celebrating Flamenco's Tangled Roots, the Body Questions. And because flamenco does have a very tangled past, there are different opinions about flamenco, different aspects of flamenco. And this is a space where we hope you can share your opinion, your question, perhaps something might not be clear, or maybe is a bit clumsy in how it's being asked or formulated. But we ask that you respect everyone's position, everyone's lived experience, as well as the opinions. You can challenge the opinion, but not the person. And we also ask that you remember that we're all here trying to be critical, but also be kind and empathetic towards each other. I'm very, very happy that I can sit here and host today, but I am not, this is not a solo show. There are many people behind the scenes that helped make today happen. First is Kozer, who is our tech guru in the background, making and ensuring that the comments and questions are being used. So please do use the chat function if you want to say where you're coming or where you're sitting in from. That would be great. Anything that comes to mind or anything you're feeling as people are talking and sharing, please feel free to use the chat to share that. We are recording. This recording may or may not go online. We're not sure, but please note that we are recording with the hopes of it going publicly available, because I know that there are many people who wanted to come today. Even last night, 2 colleagues of mine in Australia said, Rosa, I want to do this, but it's 3 a.m. for me. I can't see it. Please send me the recording. So I know that there's a lot of interest for the book, but also for the speakers that we have. And as we're thanking people, I'd like to also thank Russell Brown, who's in the space, who I've known in different ways, in a different capacity. And when I learned that they were part of the book, and Meira asked me to review the book, it was Russell's idea to say, well, what if we put and celebrated the Roma authors that were in the book? And from there, it kind of morphed into celebrating flamenco, International Flamenco Day, and thinking about how we can let people access the book that might not be able to have it, but also to hear from the author's words, the writing, but other things around the thinking around those chapters. So today, the flamenco conversation will be open, and unfortunately, Clara Chinoy could not be here today for personal reasons, but we send her and her family all of the best and a lot of strength as she goes through this period. But I am very happy to say, well, thank you to Russell, but also thank you to Miguel Ángel, who is here in this space, who moved a lot of mountains and made today happen. So thank you, Miguel Ángel, because I know that You are organizing a lot in Sevilla and in Spain around flamenco, around your work, around your own research. So I'm very grateful. So thank you for taking time to do this and to sit with us today. And just again, I've known Miguel Ángel for many, many years personally, and anytime I sit down with him, not only do I learn something, but I'm very much challenged by his thinking and the way you present things. And also you're very generous and unapologetic. And, so I just want to also just honor that, because I think that there's a lot of, it's rare that we see people that really kind of are who they are. So I'm really excited for today and to see how we look at your chapter and what you have to say. But before we do that, again, thank you to all who have come. Meira Goldberg, one of the editors, could not be here. She is in the US. So as I think you're picking up, flamenco is evolving. And although it comes, its core is in Spain, there are lots of people that are involved in flamenco, and the book is really honoring that. And flamenco, one of the editors is in the US, and unfortunately she couldn't join us, but she does send us a video about kind of her thinking. So I'd like to honor her voice by sharing that video with you now. Can you see that? Not yet. Now? Yes.
This is a good time. This is the best time. This is the only time to come together. Fractious, kicking, spilling, burly, whirling, raucous, messy, free, exploding like the seeds of a natural disorder. June Jordan. Hi, everyone. My name is Meira Goldberg, and I am co-editor with Antoni Pizá, director of the Foundation for Iberian Music at the CUNY Graduate Center, of Celebrating Flamenco's Tangled Roots, the Body Questions. Welcome to this series of book talks with the book's authors, and thank you, Rosa Cisneros and the University of Coventry, for putting this together. I have been in love with flamenco since I was 15, and I've had the immense privilege of working with and learning from the best flamenco artists in the world. This has shaped and guided my life. In all my work as performer, as a teacher, and as a scholar, I have always sought to ground my work in my lifetime as a part of this beloved community. The Body Questions is a collection of essays which poses a series of questions revolving around nonsense, cacophony, queerness, race, and the dancing body. How can flamenco, as a diasporic complex of performance and communities of practice, frictionally and critically bound to the complexities of Spanish history, illuminate theories of race and identity in performance? How can we posit and argue for genealogical relationships within and between genres across the vast expanses of the African and Roma diaspora? Neither are the essays presented here limited to flamenco, nor consequently are the responses to these questions reduced to this topic. What all the essays presented in the book do share is the wish to come together across disciplines and subject areas within the academy and without, in the whirling, raucous, and messy spaces where the body is free to celebrate its questioning, as well as the depths of wisdom and knowledge it holds and sometimes reveals. The Body Questions, published this year by Cambridge scholars, began with a 2-day conference and performance festival. The festival conference was held in October of 2018 at the Fashion Institute of Technology, where I teach, and at the CUNY Graduate Center, where I'm a resident scholar at the Foundation for Iberian Music. The performance festival featured a number of Black and Brown flamenco artists, including Flamenco Latino, Justice Miles, Kevin Lamar Jones, Alicia Bryan, Ariel Rosales and the Souls of Duende, Nelly Tirado with special guest Eddie Torres Jr., Niurka Marquez, Raul Rodriguez, and Yinka Essie Graves, whose photo by Michael Penlin graces the cover. We think this is the first book published with a Black flamenco on the cover. If the performance festival was groundbreaking and seminal, many connections were made, many opportunities were generated. So was the academic conference. We had 35 presenters from all over the world and from several different disciplines, from musicology and ethnomusicology to anthropology, comparative literature, and dance studies. Our keynote speaker was anthropologist, flamenca, and co-founder of the Uganda Flamenco Project, Agnes Asozi Kamya. As the book developed, we were honored to include several chapters from people who did not attend the conference, including Guillermo Castro on the key of danzas de negros on the standard tonalities of Black dances and early modern Hispanic music, Constance Vallis Hill writing on Soleá, conjuring the feminine in flamenco's cantejondo, and renowned flamenco artist Belén Maya's chapter on La Muñeca Subversiva. In what we believe also breaks new ground, The Body Questions features 5 chapters by Roma and Roma-allied authors. In addition to Belén, these contributors include Cristiana Grigori, who is the founder of the Roma People's Project at Columbia University, Russell Patrick Brown, whose brilliant chapter opens the book, recognized scholar and flamenco artist Clara Mora Chenoy, and scholar, poet, and anti-racist cultural worker Miguel Ángel Vargas. So thank you all so very much for coming. Thank you again to Rosa and the University of Coventry for making this happen, and enjoy.
So, nothing like a dramatic ending. So thank you, Meira, for being in the space and bringing your energy. As we've said, today is looking at a chapter, but again, I open up the space for questions about flamenco that you might have. For those that are maybe newish to flamenco, I will try to keep my personal opinions to myself and keep that for tomorrow when I actually talk about my own personal relationship with flamenco and my work. But flamenco is, in my opinion, as I just said, I wasn't going to say, but the 3 parts of flamenco, the singing, guitar playing, and the dancing, come together to create a conversation. And that soniquete, that pulse, that swing that is alive. And it's that we're here to look at how and interpret and discuss. And we have different writers that have been looking at that. So those 3 things allow us to listen to each other and gave us flamenco. So I would like to now invite my dear friend and colleague, Miguel Ángel, and his chapter is number 14 in the book, and it's called Urban Memories and Rural Mirrors Towards a History of Romani Performing Arts by Miguel Ángel Vargas. So over to you, Miguel Ángel.
Okay. First of all, dear Rosa, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure. It's always also very encouraging, as you say, to always talking to you and exchanging, even if we don't agree. That's even precisely because sometimes people in this world don't agree. Is when they should value even more this kind of time and spaces and friendship. So, well, that's the first thing. The second thing, I should also thank our dear friend Meira for making this possible. Huh? I couldn't attend the reunion, the meeting that somehow was the event that is reflected in the book, but she invited me to be like because she always think that it's important that like new Romani thinkers, researchers, artists give or are given the chance to tell their own version of what is or what it's been flamenco. So thanks Maria for having me also in that book. Um, and also, as you say, I'm in the middle of many different processes, and somehow even if I sometimes don't want, flamenco is always around me, and it shows up, and I'm somehow forced to give my opinion or to organize things around flamenco. And now that we have like tomorrow we have this international day, I will be also invited to another event in the University of Pablo de Olavide in Sevilla, and at the same time during these 2 weeks and a half I'm curating the campus Polígono Sur, which is a kind of academic and artistic space that we organize in. Well, I want to say we, I'm me as part of the people of the team that work in Factoría Cultural, which is a municipal center in Polígono Sur, the poorest, officially the poorest neighborhood in Spain. That's where I nowadays work and live. I decided to move there. So naturally there is a big population of Gitanos in that neighborhood. So yeah, so flamenco, the book, the chapter, Meira, you, and then performing arts. Why do I use this term instead of using theater, drama, dance, or well, because I try to, what I try in this chapter is to somehow open the possibility of uh, initiating a process for a different reading of the crucial variety of different manifestations in the realms of Romani performing art. And I use performing art because I try to include their, well, many of the different formats, going from the shadow theater tradition in Romani shadow theater tradition in Turkey to the work with animals and in Romania, Spain with the bullfighting, or I try to reflect on. I mean, there are many different kinds of like Romani performing arts, no? So I try to somehow offer the beginning of what should be a future. I don't know if it's could be a new field or at least part of the new field of critical Romani studies. So that's more or less at the beginning of the my what I can of my contribution today. So are you there, Rosa?
Yes.
Just to make sure that I'm speaking to someone.
Yes, no, we're here. We're following you.
Okay.
I think I'll read you the opening of the chapter, which I think situates you quite powerfully. So I'll start, quote, raising the question of when we start talking about Romani performing arts beyond Romani performers and Romani characters helps build an international reading of the crucial variety of national examples of Romani performers from Turkey to the US and across chronology. Connecting influences of the different contexts, we learn about the capacity of Romani artistic agency to break genre limits and adapt public discourses of alterity. So right there, what struck me was you, as you said, you're not only thinking about flamenco, but Romani performing arts in all of these different contexts and these different countries and cultures. And we know, in a way, it's like reverse engineering. We know that flamenco is flamenco because of the influence of these other cultures. Now, there's always the argument of, is it Gitano, is it not? And Clara has a very specific opinion about that, which I'll read about that later. But you say, quote, my position as a theater artist, Spanish, strongly influenced by the debate around flamenco makes the undoubtedly limited and fragmented vision that I offer here the results of the exigencies of my artistic practice, as well as the awareness of the limitations and repertoire of the imaginary of Roma theater. So you're also highlighting that there's a narrative that you're aware of, but it's limited, and that acknowledging that limitation as well. And I don't know if you can maybe speak about that, how in the book you navigate this idea of a narrative, or in your chapter, narrative with flamenco, but also some of the challenges.
I will try. Well, I just make a small mention to this link to flamenco, but it's powerful enough. Or I wish we could have these kind of very alive books in which we could rewrite the things that we sent to the publisher. So basically, my position with flamenco starts with the consideration of not. I mean, it's not that I don't. I try to get away of the debates of the origins of flamenco, because somehow these are very much influenced by nowadays structure of everything. Like we can. So for me, what is important of this work of what Meira is doing, not only in this book but also in Sonidos Negros, is to open the debate of race, and particularly Spain is very flamenco is part of the creation of the concept of race, not only the creation but the evolution and the sustainment of what we understand today as race. So for me, we can face this subject in two ways. One is, okay, let's work with paradigm of with the Western paradigm of history, in which we try to follow the track. We try to comment or make our analysis or even our imagination through the records we have, the paper, the theater plays, or we try to make a different analysis which should take us to a different position. So at the end, because we Romani people are not living in heavens, but we live in this very complicated world, we have to somehow combine both, like our concept of time and the concept of time of Western time. No? So once you have this done in mind, then when you go to the moment in which me, and not only me, like some other people, we realize that everything, the history of the history of flamenco started, then we realize that no matter what is in the which peoples or communities or culture or musics are in the what we call flamenco. No, like we can. It's not that we have to decide which operation is it was worse, or we have to calculate like a percentage, like percentages of which culture contributed more. I think we should get rid of the very young idea of contribution. So I think that's very, very dangerous, because that means that we will be accepted because we contributed, not because we are, not because we have the right to be, no, or to be in relation with other people, but because we have contributed. In the case of Spain, we have to bear in mind that there is no any, for example, there is no any Romani studies department in any public university of this country. Why so? There's a simple reason. So the simple reason is that because we have flamenco and flamencología, the supposed to be science of sciences that study flamenco. And flamenco occupies all, not only all, like a big chunk of the resources, the space, and even the political debate that should be addressed toward what is or what are in reality Gitanos in Spain. And then that is like an assumption that we have to make before getting into the subject, because if we don't do that, then what we will do is just the accumulation of records, and we will try to find Gitanos in the papers. So, and we have to understand why all the work is only done because of flamenco. But even if I say this, and this might sound like a very critical to many people who are interested in flamenco and the participation of Roma in the regions of it, even if I say this, that might sound also like a very critical with flamenco. So I'm very critical with flamenco. I will not abandon flamenco. It's like it's also my language. It's also my craft. So I'm a flamenco artist. I'm a theater or shows director, and many of the shows that I direct are related or linked to flamenco. So combining this idea of I'm trying to understand what was or what is, or what are we knowing of our history in this country, and what we know, what was our part in the regions of flamenco. Then we had to talk definitively of what has been my somehow obsession for many years, which is trying to understand what is the space of gitanismo or afición a lo gitano. Even the very own idea of afición in American English is, I mean, it's been taken as a word. Like it's very common to hear people talking about being aficionado to different art forms. So the very own idea of aficionado, to being aficionado, should be put in question. What is that? When was this created, and why? Mainly why, not only when. And we had to talk then about the Prisión General de Gitanos. I don't use the terminology, the historiographical name of Gran Redada, because that wasn't the name at the time. The process was called Prisión General de Gitanos in 1749. And lately, I'm saying this, Rosa, because I try to, as I said earlier, I wish I could rewrite many of the things that I because
Yes.
because we are working, we are still trying to understand how has been the process.
Absolutely.
And I will try to be precise and short because I want to give space to questions and comments. So
sure. And thank you. Just as a clarifying, for those that don't know what aficionado is, I'll read the definition, so it's not my interpretation. It's a person who is very knowledgeable and enthusiastic about an activity, subject, or pastime. So if you have a flamenco aficionado or gitano, it just gives you a sense. And I think, Miguel Ángel, there are a lot of things in there that I'd like to maybe open up to others to also ask their questions. But a few things you said about you've said it twice now, rewriting something that you've written in the past. And I think that's true for artists as well. When we make something performed and documented, it lives. And, I know as a dancer, if I see something, I think, oh God, I don't want to see a video of myself dancing because it felt different and I've kind of moved on. And I think that's what you're also saying with the writing. And my own personal master's thesis was very similar, where I think you challenged me as well at one point about something I had written. And at the time, I had already now moved on. But it brings up this tension about academia looking at specific topics or communities like flamenco or like gitanos, where in order, as you were saying, for something to be validated, it needs that academic it needs to take that academic space in some way. And I'd like to maybe ask you, you say you're being very critical with flamenco, but at the same time, living it as an artist, as a person, you mentioned you're living now in an area, for those that don't know, when we say, it's a poor area, it's not, just that, I don't know, maybe there's a bit of rubbish on the street. It's a very different reality. And I think that yesterday, Russell also brought up this idea that this reality that we're all coming from different positions, and some people couldn't even join this call because they didn't have stable internet. And so, that this reality for our own community members, our own gitanos, is real. And it's not that our community members don't have anything to say about flamenco. It's about how we enter these spaces, about talking about flamenco, presenting our lived reality. So as I read your chapter, you kind of also present this struggle of time, this idea of time, that we're in this time of an academic time when we're studying flamenco, this performance time of flamenco, but then there's a flamenco that's living in the day-to-day. And it's very difficult my interpretation of what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's difficult to kind of allow that day-to-day flamenco to continue to exist, and you're also writing about it. And that's kind of standing still in time. And then you have this. So how do you kind of come to terms with that? How do you allow both to exist?
Let me be clear, at least in my term. Flamenco has no problem. Flamencos do. Flamenco Gitano has no problems. Gitanos do even more. And flamenco is an art form. It's a professional, choreographical, musical, many different things. It's a Western genre in which undoubtedly Gitanos has been in since the beginning, because it's been created for like we are there. My position is that we have to be ourselves as a Romani researchers, or maybe I'm talking here to my desire of how future Romani researchers should approach flamenco, because there is also a big gap between what flamenco means for a big international community. That's for me, it's kind of very weird. We are talking about flamenco community. It's very weird for me because it's similar to the idea of being a gitanado. So, and let me try to explain what I wanted to do earlier, which is what is this idea of aficionado and why that fashion and ideology at the same time appear. Um, and every time I tell this story, I try to make it better. I try to learn from the people that I'm telling it. So it's like as a kind of I see myself more as a storyteller than a historian, or maybe both things at the same time. So let's think about Spain, 1749. The Spanish Empire is decreasing. There are military people coming back to the country. The policies of Spain are somehow presented as in conflict between the Enlightenment and the forces that are against it. There is a movement that happened in the same year of 1749, which is known for, 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 for for the Roma people of Spain, but also for those who know a bit of the history of flamenco. That year is very important because that's the year in which the new Spanish state, and I say new Spanish state because until that time, more or less, what we had was kingdoms, no? Kingdoms of the Kingdom of Castilla, Aragon. Um, so the new state of Spain, in the same year, with a difference of month, um, released two national um, um, operations. And this is something that I just it's not that I just realized, but it's something that I'm working now, and believe me, I think it has the connection with the beginning of Afición a los Gitanos, which is in the base of flamenco. So that same year, 1749, and let's not forget that even that the Spanish Empire was decreasing, it was still strong, and slavery was very active internationally. So the 30th of July of that year, 1749, the total Gitano population of Spain was put in jail. Women and men separated, men being from 7 years above. Um, during 16 years, they were used as slaves for the new Spanish state to build the harbor, the places where they were going to build the new Spanish fleet. Um, but 3-4 months later, so in the same year, 1749, we have um, at the moment, at the time, the biggest survey of the resources and richness of the country. So that is known as Catastro de Ensenada. It's a survey that was sent from the government in Madrid to every little council in Spain to obliging them to tell to the state what were the resources of every council, like how many people lived, lands, how many horses, how many factories and wineries, all the biggest study of the resources of the country. And why are these two operations connected? And let's now tell the people that operation, the Prisión General de Gitanos, was somehow contested through three different, well, I would say four. It has like four different consequences. The first one, obviously, the total population of Gitanos of Spain, that they were not nomadic, that they were stable, they were living in houses, being part of the Christian communities, like being part of society. So suddenly they will go again like to the like starting point, no? Like let's say like they were they were forced to be again poor. So the second consequence was that there was some kind of some complaints of mayors stating in letters to the king that you have taken our gitanos and you have somehow provoked problems in our towns. The third one was somehow for like some reactions from priests from the lower part of the church, priests and monks that for pure Christian solidarity or compassion, they were saying, hey, for God's sake, these people should not be in jail. And the fourth one, which is the one connected to the roots of flamenco, is that suddenly nobility people and the new bourgeoisie of Spain started to dress as gitanos, started to speak uh, as like gitanos. They started publishing books, researching gitanos. They started to produce hundreds of theater plays in which there was an obsession with gitanos and gitanas, and all this craziness, all this obsession with the gitano people of Spain, it had a reason. It was not like an admiration for the gitano people, but it was um, um, they were used to basically show the anti-enlightenment reaction of nobility and bourgeois. Why? Basically because that that two operations that started to be taken in 1749 and had the intention to create the new taxing administration of Spain. Um, so the state needed to show strength to the nobility and to the church. Why? Because at the time, the nobility and the church didn't pay taxes. So, but they didn't. The new state, the Enlightenment state of Spain didn't have the capacity to force the nobility and the church to pay taxes. So they somehow needed to use, hey, look what we have done with Haitian population. So watch that we will do the same if you don't accept the new administration of taxes. So the problem was that that operation, the Prisión Federal de Gitanos, ended badly. Like it was very has like very badly made. And so um but first of all, because the resistances of the Gitano population, and second, because they didn't have the capacity to erase, which was the idea, like to commit a genocide of the Gitano population of Spain. So so as a consequence of that, some people, some historians, and some people linked to flamenco, to the studies of flamenco, they would tell, well, as a consequence of the Prisión General de Gitanos, they talk about the beginning of gitanophilia, no? Like this, like no matter how cruel and hard was Prisión de Gitanos, that the Gitanos ended being benefited. And for me, that's outrageous. That's like an insult to the memory of our ancestors. Like, are you saying that we chose to be in public, that we chose to be so visible that we had to dress as what you designed for us? So imagine, Rosa, that our people were 16 years in jail, and suddenly when they could get out of jail, they found that there was this imaginary built on them. There was like all over the country that there was this idea that being Gitano was being Spanish. Like the Spanishness was measured through how much you would look Gitano or not. And that's the beginning of agitanado. That's the beginning of afición al agitano. To be gitano meant to know, to be enlightenment, to not be European, to not be rational, to not pay taxes, to not participate in the what then was known as the foreign fashion. So, and all these things has to be taken into consideration among our people, like this idea of when we talk about the need of make visible our culture, no, like because people don't know our culture. Sometimes I think I wish we were invisible, or at least we had been invisible during since 1749 until very recently, because that would have meant that we wouldn't have to have dressed the gypsy dress, and I use the word gypsy in this case.
Thank you, Miguel Ángel. I've heard you talk about or share this historical reality and situation many times, and each time I hear it, I pick up something new. And you know, I'm always shocked by how this history isn't known by many, but especially within, I don't want to say the artistic world, but I think, you know, since flamenco sits on that artistic or performing arts, to use your word, platform, I'd like to ask you, how important do you think it is to know this reality for whether it's dancers or musicians or curator, people in the arts world, to know where this comes from? Do you think that it would change the way that they approach maybe viewing or engaging with flamenco?
Well, I can't accept that this debate would take time. It would take time because it's complicated, painful, and because it seems that like I'm telling our people, hey, what you think is your culture, it's being manipulated, and what you think is your language, it's been created by Gache. What you think is your public image was designed by foreigners, and I know that telling these things might be hard for our people, but believe me, I think it's really important for us, for everybody, not only Gitanos, like for all of us to start rethinking about how we see the history of flamenco. Sometimes I make this kind of 3 steps process of how to deal with this, like how to deal with this way of telling the history of flamenco. And I simplified it in 3 steps. The first one is that, okay, since 1765, more or less, which is the year in which the population, the Gitano population of Spain was relieved in the Coalición General de Gitanos. So from 1765 on, like I would say, that's my opinion, until 1922, the Cante Hondo competition in Granada with Lorca and Manuel de Falla, until somehow at that moment we have this really long time of afición a los gitanos. What that it means that the Romani bodies, like the Roma Gitano bodies, were used as this part of this entertainment, of this the idea of juerga, which is the very young idea of juerga is the idea of trying to catch the concept of time of the Gitano fiesta and make it possible for a group of people who are not Gitanos, like offering this idea of you will have a good time, a good Gitano time. it's like saying, okay, so the afición a lo gitano is this idea of a kind of bourgeois private gathering in which you have musicians, Gitano musicians, prostitutes, drugs, military people, and excessive lyricism. Like, so, and what happened with Lorca and Falla in 1929-22 is like the beginning of the institutionalization of flamenco. And that is, in my poetic critical term, that is the democratization of the right to have a juerga. Like every working class people have also the right to have fun, like the señoritos, like the bourgeois. So then it's like the creation of this idea of afición a lo flamenco, afición al flamenco. So we change from afición a lo gitano to afición al flamenco, and we are still in that. No? We are in 2022. We are still in that, and my position, my kind of academic, political, and personal and artistic position is that we should get rid of afición. We should abolish afición. What would we have then, or what do we need after? What should be then the future? The future should be self-representation. So we have the right to have our own image, our own time, our own concept of what is art.
Thank you, Miguel Ángel. And I think that's a really beautiful way to move into the next part. We will have a space for question and answers, but I do want to check in with our bodies and just kind of, again, listen to a bit of flamenco. So in this next parts of just next couple minutes, as you sit with everything that Miguel Ángel has offered us and process, and again, this is an ongoing conversation. Yesterday, Belén Maya said very beautifully, I would add, that flamenco is constantly transforming. How can something that has transformed people not transform itself? And I'd like to just allow us to be open to the potential of being transformed, or to learning and challenging each other. But to do that, I'd like to just sit with a bit of flamenco music to honor the idea of listening. So Kozer, just a few minutes, and as you listen, if anything comes up for you, if any question, feel free to use the chat. Russell Brown, I do see your question, and we will get to that in a moment. So Kozer, if you could play our music that we see your slideshow here. So thank you all for sitting with that particular piece of music. It is a piece of music that I've chosen that's called Ida y Vuelta. So at one point in flamenco history, there were a group of flamencos that traveled across the Atlantic. They observed what was happening and brought those rhythms and those instruments back to flamenco. And this is an example of that. It's very light. It's very I think just symbolic of what we're hoping to do here, of coming and going and checking in with ourselves, but also with the writing. You left us, Miguel Ángel, with the idea that we should abolish aficionado and really kind of sit with self-representation. And I think that this idea of self-representation comes up a lot, not only for Romani studies, but also in the arts practice and for different communities from that are minoritized or that are seen to be from specific backgrounds that maybe aren't in the mainstream spaces. And to also to anchor, I think Russell has asked, Miguel Ángel, have you written on this and do you have a citation? Because I think this idea, I mean, even though you were opened up by saying, you know, the writing and publishing, and you want to kind of rethink that sometimes. I think it is important to also, the citation and the writing about this history is important and part of that self-representation. So I don't know if you can answer that. Have you written about that that story that you shared with us?
Sorry, I have here Lucia, my daughter.
Hola, Lucía, guapa. Muy grande, mira qué mayor. Hello. Yes, no problem, no problem.
This is what happened when you work from home, or you try to deal with the complexity of life. So yes, I have written about this, but as you said, we also should cite our people who is working in this direction, like not assuming like the history of flamenco has been written for granted, no? And I will insist in reading Ivan Periáñez. I think it's crucial for us because Ivan has opened like a path for all of us of analyzing flamenco from the perspective of the epistemologies of the South. Ivan Periáñez, who is a Romani Gitano scholar from Sevilla. I would also cite a quote, Calea Menge, who is a kind of political, Romani political organization in Spain, and they also are working toward questioning the role of Spain in the beginning of the current structure of the racist state. And I would encourage people to read Helios Fernandez Garcés, who is one of our biggest theoretician, like writer, thinker on how it's crucial for us to understand that the modern concept of race was invented, created in Spain, and mainly in Sevilla. And so this idea that the 15th century Sevilla had the capacity to use for the first time in history the modern concept of race as a legal tool to differentiate people for the improvement of the conquering not only of America but other countries. So there is this debate for us to take, and Meira has opened the debate when she talks in Sonidos Negros about the genealogy of flamenco body, and she goes back to 15th century representation of the Moorish and the native Indians, and then the black people and the black bodies, and then at the end, finally, that book, and then finally how the Romani body, the Gitano body, represents the current blackness of Spain. What she is doing is that forcing us to reconsider what's the role of flamenco in the perpetuation of the racist structure of this country. So it's, and I say again, it's a painful debate because most of our people perceive flamenco as something, not only as something good, which is good, but like our only our only tool to navigate through the systemic violence of this country. And I'm thinking also because it's very important that for as you mentioned at the beginning, it's very important to state that we are researching from a different point. We are researching from the idea that there are more than 400 poor neighborhoods full of gitanos in Andalusia, that the happy image of flamenco that has been imposed on us is it's very complex. And the idea that there is that flamenco is a tool to become gitano for people who are not is a very complex idea. So there is there is, you can find this very easily everywhere. This idea that you can be gitano if you follow certain guides, certain books, certain academies. Like this idea of being a gitanado is like very complex, and you find a lot of researchers talking about that. I mean, very recently, I had a debate with Gerhard Steingles, a sociologist who is known for having opened a new approach to flamenco from sociology. He's very known, and he curated a whole school with the new flamencology, so linked with linking sociology, and he told me after having spent time telling or storytelling these things, he 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 felt the need to tell me, hey, you know, in the 18th century Spain, Gitano meant something different. Gitano wasn't anymore an ethnic category. And I told him, hey, Professor Steingres, I appreciate your books. I read them, but you are getting it wrong, because I won't tell my grandmother, you are fake, you are not a gitana, because there is a bunch of gotcha of white people dressing as gitanos, and they think that that's appropriate and that's a position and that's valid. And I think we should start saying this thing that, yeah, and I'm not being essentialist. Please don't take it in that direction. I'm trying to reconsider all the efforts, all the space that this idea, this the debates of flamenco has put on us, like these identitarian anxieties with flamenco.
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously, it's very layered, and I think you raised the point earlier, and I will just also use that to transition into Clara's chapter. But you said that this history is very painful, and that this history, you know, and as you were just saying, you know, you used your own grandmother, and that challenges this idea of these theories that exist in books for academics, when you say, well, actually, I'm not going to say that to my family member, my elder, my community. It takes it from this very kind of numbers place to the human and the flesh and bones. And I think that that's a little bit of the disconnect, or that is a disconnect that comes up when we're debating about things or cultures or art forms. We have to remember that there are people involved in this. And as we talk about this history, it is painful, and it can trigger, and it can be quite traumatic. And it's, I think, very, we have to be very nuanced and respectful, and also be willing to listen. And that listening is political as well. And that's something that, you know, I think the ability to listen, to be humble, and to know when or how to ask. That's something my mother would always say, Rosita, you have to know when and how to ask a question, not only ask the question. It's very subtle. And I think that's what you're also asking people, that when you're saying, you're not to take you as an essentialist, and, but to also understand that this is a reality that is not removed from you and from your family. And I think that's true for many of us that are trying to enter the debate, but also to know your place in the debate as well.
Yeah, because if we don't do that, Rosa, then some people could accuse us of being so elite or so academic, or not being not. I mean, I started this the research of the origins of Gitanismo Teatral in 18th and 19th centuries, Cadiz and Sevilla, which it was like somehow perceived even for myself, and sometimes like okay, that's a very academic, archival, text-based research. Who is going to like it? Who is going to take it like as an important thing? But then I realized that the the only way to explain the current situation of the Gitano population of Spain is to go back to these ideas too. Like there is no possibility to only be based on the cruel reality of the harsh reality of our people in Spain, and not consider what has been done previously. Normally, what you find in books on the history of the Gitanos of Spain, what you find is just a list of kings and a list of acts and laws against them. And that's not our history. Our history is something else, or should be written in a different format, and should be told in a different way. Because my history is not the history of the rulers. Of obviously, we have been affected by what the different rulers have been deciding across the time. Yeah, obviously, but there is a need to rewrite our histories from a different position, and that would make the debate richer. That would
Yes.
that would teach us different things, and that would make that will give our people strength.
Absolutely. And this we're here to talk about a chapter in flamenco, but what you've presented and uncovered is this really complex broader history that is not only about flamenco and gitanos, but about its entire environment. And I think the culture, the community, the politics, the laws, all of that framework, that structure has influenced flamenco in a number of ways. And I think to for any questions, and then I will hand over to Russell for 5 minutes of will set us up for tomorrow, which is the final day, and actually the International Flamenco Day. And tomorrow we won't be looking at the chapters, but we'll be looking at, Russell will be dancing as well, and I will be looking at my own screen work and critically reflecting on that. And Russell will set us up with his concept of protocols and how that will feed into tomorrow. But I do want, if anyone has a question, I do want to create a space for that question or comments or thoughts.
Russell asks if anyone could read anything of this in any place. Yeah, I have left some written things in the flamenco section of Roma archive. There's a whole chapter on this. A really poetic text I wrote called "The Broken Shield of Perseus." It's in the Rome archive website. There are other places I think I could try to. I mean, I try not to open an academia.edu profile, but I think I should, just for people to find these debates easily.
Yes, I've put the link to the Rome archive in the chat. Thank you, Catherine, for coming. She says, really sorry, but I have to leave now. But thank you so much for this rich and informative discussion. Looking forward to tomorrow. Oh, thank you. Bye, Catherine. Bye. Yes, and I will just, since you've mentioned the Rome archive, I think it has its own flamenco section, which also includes writing, but videos and visuals of different Gitano families talking about flamenco from their own personal experience, and you have others also writing about it. So I think it's a great space to look and to see, especially because the Rome archive was about self-representation of the communities that make up the Roma and Sinti and Gypsy Romani traveler communities. So I think that's important to say, that here in the UK, they use the term Gypsy Roma travelers. In Germany, they might say Roma and Sinti. And, there are different communities that make up the broader, larger, I would say, Roma nation. And without further ado, I will hand over to Russell, who is an American Roma dancer, colleague. Yes, so Russell.
Oh, great, thanks. Miguel, it was really great to hear you speak. I loved reading your chapter and hearing you speak. I just had to say that first. I been asked to write a chapter for a joint publication with Dezo Monte. I don't know if you know him, but I'm going to write about anti-Gypsyism and anti-Romani racism in dance studies. So I hope to help the conversation, as I think that's really important. But that brings me to, for tomorrow, I just wanted to say, as with yesterday, I brought in some protocols. Tomorrow, I'd like to enact those physically. I acknowledge the lands I'm on, the Lenape lands that of Lenape Hoking that represent New York City and Manhattan. And so I call that in, and so I live in the Greenwich Village, and so I'll be bringing that in. Also, the Greenwich Village is a traditionally African-American and Romani neighborhood that is undergoing neocolonialism. And so I will bring that into the space and also honor the kind of maritime roots of the neighborhood and the Black, trans, Latinx, Vogue Ballroom House community that also shaped my involvement in my sense of place here. So I will be trying to enact those in space, and then also sharing that with everyone through physical activity that I developed working with many dancers living with intellectual disability in Ireland during the pandemic. So as I could think about how to make these digital spaces more inclusive and representative of the body, so we stay in the body. So if you have any questions, or also if you, protocols are a great space to kind of really step forward. It's not just Q&A, to step forward and interrupt or speak and make sure that the body or the lived experience is heard. So I really welcome that. You're not disrupting. You are kind of, well, you are disrupting colonialism, hopefully. So anyway, and all the forms of racism that so many of us, including Romani people, face. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you. And as we started the session, acknowledging that there is a before today that has occurred, and many people that not only helped prepare and create this book, prepare for today, but that have helped flamenco become what it is today, this very day. But as we enter and honor tomorrow, that we also honor ourselves in that, and this was one of the things that came up yesterday. you know, how can flamenco be used for self-identity within museum spaces? And so I just want us to remember that who we are in these moments are enough, and that flamenco, whatever flamenco, I think flamenco can be very inclusive and bring people in if you come in just being yourself. It's the performative aspects that I think is where we get into trouble. And I think Clara's, you know, description about doing this and wearing the face, and you know, is where it becomes something else. But flamenco at its core is quite powerful. And as Belén Maya said yesterday, honoring her, flamenco transforms people in some capacity, and it is constantly transforming. So each of you have come and showed up today to listen, to be part of this, to disrupt. And thank you very much for that. And I know that many people will be listening to this after, once the recording goes out. And to those that have asked for this recording, you are in the space, and I will send this to you. And of course, honoring today, I'd like to say thank you, Miguel Ángel, for taking us back to look at that historical reality, but also honoring, you know, your voice today and for sharing that opinion with us. So thank you very much. Thank you.
A pleasure.
And yes, our music. We have our slide. It's great. And as always, let's finish with some music, with some flamenco. And yeah, so check in with your bodies, and thank you for coming. Thank you all.